inshallah, by Brother Hadi, with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والنجم إذا هوى ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى وما ينطق عن الهوى إن هو إلا وحي يوحى. علمه شديد القوى ذو مرة فاستوى وهو بالأفق الأعلى ثم دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى فأوحى إلى عبده ما أوحى. ما كذب الفؤاد ما رأى عثاد ما رنح على ما يرعى. ولقد رآه نزلة أخرى عند سدرات المنتهى عندها جنة المأوى إذ يغشى السدرة ما يغشى. ما زغ البصر وما طغى لقد رأى من آيات ربه الكبرى. أفرأيتم اللات والعزى ومناة الثالثة الأخرى ألكم الذكر وله الأنثى تلك إذا قسمة ضيزى إن هي إلا أسماع سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان إن يتبعون إلا الظن وما تهوى الأنفس ولقد جاءهم من ربهم الهدى. أم للإنسان ما تمنى فلله الآخرة والأولى. وكم من ملاك في السماوات لا تغني شفاعتهم شيئا إلا من بعد أن يأذن الله لمن يشاء ويرضى. الصلوات.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Jazakallah, Brother Hadi. I would now like to request Sister Abiha Batul from Scouts 1499 to make a presentation, inshallah, with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today I'm going to be reciting a poem on Imam Ali alayhi salam that I wrote by myself. Salawat. Oh Ali, Ya Ali, when you got struck by a sword, it was in your prayers. When you got struck by a sword, the orphans wonder where you were. Oh the modest, oh the one who the Prophet called brother, oh the one who people call brave, oh the one who we call for help. Ya Ali, when you got struck, the orphans brought milk, but it was too late. Oh Ali, when you were giving your children your will, you told them to take care of the orphans, but oh Ali, your own children were orphans that night. Salawat.
Ahsan, mashallah. Jazakallah, Sister Abiha. I would now like to request Brother Hassan to please recite a salam. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allah.
خوشنودی امام زمانہ بلندتر صلوات اللہم علی والوں کرو پرسا علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا علی والوں کرو پرسا علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا لرزتے پاؤں سے شبیر و شبر چلے مسجد سے گھر بابا کو لے کر چلے مسجد سے گھر بابا کو لے کر ہے سر عباس نے تھاما علی کا ہے سر عباس نے تھاما علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا ستم کی تیگ ہے در پہ چلائی انہی لوگوں نے کی یہ بے وفائی انہی لوگوں نے کی یہ بے وفائی جو کھاتے تھے صدا صدقہ علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا ابھی زہرا ہوئی دنیا سے رخصت ابھی زہرا ہوئی دنیا سے رخصت کہ اب سہنا ہے یہ صدمہ علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا کہیں گش کھا کے زینب گر رہی ہے کہیں کلثوم آہیں بھر رہی ہے کہیں کلثوم آہیں بھر رہی ہیں سروں سے اٹھ گیا سایہ علی کا سروں سے اٹھ گیا سایہ علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا غریبوں اور مسکینوں کا والی ملائک جس کے در پہ تھے سوالی ملائک جس کے در پہ تھے سوالی پڑھا جبریل نے نوحالی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا علی والوں کرو پرسا علی کا لہو سے تر ہوا چہرہ علی کا محمد وآل محمد صلوات
Jazakallah, Brother Hassan. MashaAllah. Jazakallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, before the program starts today, I would like to say first and foremost, Jazakallah to all our sustaining members, donors, volunteers, and program sponsors for your contributions. May those be in kind, financially, or with your time. Alhamdulillah. I do have a few announcements, inshallah. Inshallah, tonight we will have Matam Dari after the speech, before Salat. Tomorrow night's Amal night, inshallah, again. And tomorrow we will have Amal starting at 9:30 p.m., inshallah. The details will be sent out by Sheikh Mahdi, inshallah, on the WhatsApp groups. We appreciate the support the community has showed in terms of iftar registration, and we thank you for your consideration. It helps us immensely to manage ordering iftar so that we're not doing any ziya, any israf by ordering excessive quantities. Jazakallah for that. And I hope the community continues your support in this manner, inshallah. There are some upcoming programs that I would like to remind everybody of. We have the night before Eid festival, inshallah, on Sunday, the 30th of April. We also have a Scouts 1499 girls lock-in coming up as well. That too, I believe, is on the 30th of April. And then we, inshallah, have the Eid picnic on Saturday, May the 7th, inshallah. As always, event details and descriptions will be sent out via our WhatsApp texts. They will also be present on our website, cfkdfw.org. And for those who aren't familiar with our WhatsApp groups, the QR codes are here on the walls. And I would highly recommend you please join our WhatsApp group to stay up to date with all the information that we have to send. If you are not a member yet, please consider becoming one by contacting our membership director, Brother Asif Patel. For opportunities to donate and sponsor programs or help behind the scenes, please speak to myself or any of the existing volunteers, inshallah. I would now like to request everybody to please recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of today's program sponsors, all our marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman. Inshallah, before I request the Sheikh to please come on to the member, there's a few announcements, inshallah. We have found a set of AirPods that were found on the ladies' side yesterday. If there's somebody who's looking for it, please contact me or any of the volunteers, and inshallah we'll hand them over. There's also a ring that we found, so please let us know if you've lost it, and please come in contact with us, inshallah. I would like to also announce generally after iftar, when we are setting down our iftar, for the people who wish to break fast with us, I would request them to please leave some space for the volunteers to set down the dastarkhans, and inshallah the volunteers will be bringing the iftar to you. And for those mu'mineen who do not wish to break fast here and wish to leave, there will inshallah be to-go boxes available at the exit. And tonight, alhamdulillah, we've had a sponsor who has prepared some kids meals, inshallah. And so those will be handed out to the kids, inshallah. And I would like to request everybody to please recite a loud salawat for the acceptance of this gift. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajam. I would now like to request the Sheikh to please come to the member with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد محمد عجل فرجه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. One more salawat, please. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جاءتكم جنود فأرسلنا عليهم ريحا وجنودا لم تروها وكان الله بما تعملون بصيرا. إذ جاءوكم من فوقكم ومن أسفل منكم وإذ زاغت الأبصار وبلغت القلوب الحناجر وتظنون بالله الظنونا. هنالك ابتلي المؤمنون وزلزلوا زلزالا شديدا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات الله. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. We ended yesterday's discussion on the second part of the Battle of Uhud, after the mushrikeen had come to the outskirts of Medina, and the Prophet left the city of Medina and went to war with them. And this battle that started out as a victory slowly started to turn into a defeat. But it was with the wisdom of the Prophet and with the support of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he took this defeat and turned it into a victory. And that was because when the Muslims all turned away from the Prophet and they started to run away, the Quran says, إِذْ تُسْعِدُونَ وَلَا تَلْوُونَ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ, when you were running for your lives and you could care less that the Prophet is standing there and pleading for you to return back to him, we mentioned that the only person who stood and stayed and was playing a big role was Ali ibn Abi Talib. And that is because this narration, recite a salawat please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That is because this narration that Shia and Sunni have narrated, that the Malaika looked at what Ali ibn Abi Talib was doing and they spoke to the Prophet and they said, لَقَدْ عَجِبَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, The malaika are surprised by the muwasat and the assistance that this young man is giving to you, O Muhammad. And the Prophet responded to Jibreel and he said, وَمَا يَمْنَعُهُ, and why wouldn't he do this? إِنَّهُ مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْ, he's from me and I am from him. And hence, all the dispute that we have in history about who was there, how many were there 7, were they 9, were they from Quraysh, were they from Ansar, were they from Muhajirin, all of this dispute goes away because at the end of the day, the Malaika only said this about the work and the effect of one of these individuals. And that shows that his role was the key role and the most important role. And it's just interesting, sometimes you hear people, they discuss the seerah of the Prophet. They'll go through the whole battle of Uhud, there won't even be a mention of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It really brings pain to our hearts, really. Nonetheless, this army is now coming back and the Prophet was able to take them, give them moral support. When Abu Sufyan came and started to say those lines that he said, the Prophet taught the Muslims how to respond to Abu Sufyan. When they went back to Medina, the munafiqeen came now and they say, we told you not to listen to Muhammad. Look at how you got massacred. And the Quran responded to them. And the Quran said, قُلْ لَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ لَبَرَزَ الَّذِينَ كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقَتْلُ إِلَى مَضَاجِعِهِمْ. That if you were in your beds, and those who were supposed to leave this world on this day, death would have come into their beds. And they would have left this world anyways, number one. Number two, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا أَمْوَاتًا. Don't think that these who have been killed, فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا, that they're dead. They're not dead even. So the whole premise of your criticism doesn't even make sense fundamentally. And the Prophet was able to salvage something out of this battle. This is where we ended our discussion yesterday. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to move on to another chapter between tonight and tomorrow night from the life of the Prophet and the seerah of the Prophet, and that is none but the battle of Ahzab. Every time the Prophet goes through a battle, you would assume that things are going to get easier from this point onwards. In reality, things get more and more difficult. As time goes on, more people join Islam, but the problems that the Muslims now have to deal with get bigger and bigger as well. It's kind of how life works, in general. And so, tonight, inshallah, we'll be discussing the battle of Ahzab and the many lessons that can be learned from it. And in order to do that, we will pose the following questions. Number one, how did the battle of Ahzab begin? And who was the key and chief instigator of the different tribes coming together against our Holy Prophet? Number two, how did the Jewish tribes of Khaybar convince so many other tribes to join them in this effort to go and oppose the Prophet? And what did they promise them in return for joining the army of the Ahzab? Number three, what glad tidings did the Prophet give to his companions when they were digging the trench? And how does this correlate and have parallels with the promise that we have been given about the return of our 12th Imam? Number four, what does Imam Ali say as it relates to living a lavish lifestyle? And what did he write in his letter to his governor when he received the news that his governor was attending lavish gatherings? And number five, and finally, what lesson can be learned from the way that the Jewish tribes were able to convince one another, and in particular the tribe of Bani Qurayza? What lesson can we learn from that? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Let us begin from here. This battle now, the battle of Ahzab, is happening, some say 4th year, some say 5th year. 5th seems to be the year. Badr, 2nd year after Hijrah. Uhud, 3rd year after Hijrah. Ahzab is now showing up in the 5th year after Hijrah. In a lot of ways, it's showing up at the worst time possible. Because now slowly these Muslims are getting together, slowly they're gathering their strength. And these battles that we cover, these are just the main battles that we covered. There were smaller battles that were happening during this time. There were confrontations that the Prophet was having with other tribes as well. So these are just the major ones. They are now recovering, getting their strength now, and all of a sudden something's going to pop up that they never even imagined would ever pop up. A challenge that the Quran says, وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا. It would shake the body of this Muslim ummah like nothing else. It's a challenge that's coming their way at probably the worst time. And that is the Ahzab. Ahzab is the plural of Hizb. Hizb meaning the party, the group. And why was it called Ahzab? Because in this battle, it's different from all the other battles that the Prophet is going to have. In Badr, He was dealing with the caravan of Quraysh and so on and so forth. In Uhud, Quraysh and some of the people who were with them. But now the whole Arabian Peninsula is going to unite against the prophets. This is different. In Badr, you had 1,000 on the other side. In Uhud, you had 3,000, they say. In Ahzab, you're going to have 10,000 on the other side. It's a completely different challenge. And it requires a completely different strategy, as you will see from the Prophet as well. All of these tribes are going to come together. How did this all come together? How do 10,000 people come together anyways? What happened was the Prophet had certain confrontations with the Jewish tribes that were in Medina. In Medina, that there were 3 Jewish tribes. All 3 of them, when the Prophet came, he signed peace treaties with them. All 3 of them broke their peace treaties, and the Prophet had confrontations with them. One of them was a group known as Bani Nadir. Bani Nadir, they were expelled because they broke their peace treaty. And when they were expelled, they went to the land of Khaybar, some of them stayed there, but they slowly could not take the idea that now this Arabian Peninsula, it seems as though Muhammad is becoming the #1 power in the whole thing. Before, the Jewish people, they had their own status. In fact, the Arab, when they looked at the Jewish people, they looked at people who were higher in status than them. Because the Jewish people had culture, the Jewish people had a sharia already, they had a religion, they had a history, they had all of this kind of stuff. The Arab didn't have any of this stuff. If you remember, we discussed on the first night, they didn't have any of this stuff. And so they looked at them and they felt inferior towards the Jewish people. Now Muhammad has come into the picture. The Jewish people don't have any power at all. They break their peace treaties, and the Prophet is forced to expel them. He has no option to do, nothing else to do. So one of the heads of Bani Nadir, who was now expelled from Medina, he couldn't take this anymore. And he knows that our numbers are not that big. Jewish people didn't have the biggest presence. So he said, we have to come together and think about what we're going to do. So what did he do? His name was Huyay ibn Akhtab. Huyay ibn Akhtab. This is the person who starts the whole battle of Ahzab. Side note here, his daughter turns out to be a wonderful person. And his daughter turns out to be the wife of the prophets. See how the world works. Safiya, his daughter, will eventually become the wife of the Prophet. But that's a side note, we'll discuss more about that tomorrow. Huyay ibn Akhtab comes and he approaches with 10-15 of the other Jewish people. He comes to Mecca. Comes to Mecca because he knows if he wants to get rid of Muhammad, he can't do it on his own. He needs help. So he comes to Quraysh, comes to Abu Sufyan. He says, listen, Abu Sufyan, we have come to you, and the only reason why I've come to you is because we want to come together so we can put an end to Muhammad. We want to uproot him. We want to fundamentally undermine him. We can't take this anymore. Abu Sufyan said, this is the real reason you've come to us? You've come all the way from Khaybar? They passed by Medina to come to Mecca. So you've come because of this? He said, yes, this is the only reason why we've come. And Abu Sufyan said, marhaban. Welcome. What a wonderful trip you made. I'll take it. Marhaban, ahlan, welcome. You've come to the right place. This is also what Abu Sufyan wants. And he knows he can't do it on his own. He tried in Badr, tried in Uhud. He knows he can't do it on his own either. So he's like, yes, we have to join forces at this point. So they came, and Abu Sufyan said, you know, the most beloved people to us are the ones who can help us against Muhammad. So why not? Sure. You're the most beloved people in our eyes right now. Huyay said, well, we have to make a pact amongst ourselves because we don't want the story of Badr and Uhud to repeat itself. This time it has to be like something different. So he told Abu Sufyan, he said, you have to go gather all of Quraysh. Quraysh came with 50 of their elders. They gathered around the Kaaba and they swore in the presence of the Kaaba that they would not leave Muhammad this time unless and only if they kill him. And as long as one of us is remaining, we will stay until we achieve this goal. This is the ultimate pact that they have now made. They came, they made this pact in front of the Kaaba, and slowly they went. These Jewish tribes then went and started to gather more tribes on their side. And the people of Quraysh, they started to gather the people that they had covenants with. The way it worked back in the day is that you had your own tribe, then your tribe had covenants and peace treaties with other tribes. And then when you wanted to go to war, you would call on all these other tribes. And this other tribe might have another 2 tribes. that they have a covenant with. So they will call on them. And those two other tribes might have it, and it just keeps going on and on. So they started to gather everything, and you find that the Jewish tribes and Quraysh, they were willing to give anything and everything. And amongst those things that they did was that these Jewish tribes who lived in Khaybar, they would go around to these other tribes. They used to say, listen, if you just send your people to come and fight with us, we will give you the worth of a whole year of the dates of Khaybar. This is a lot of money. Khaybar was known for its dates. And they promised these things to different tribes so that they could get all the power that they possibly could, because they felt like this is the final time we're going to do this. We have to do it right. Do it once, you do it right. That's it. We tried before, we failed. This time it's going to be different. And I want to make a side note here, real quick, that this Khaybar was where the Garden of Fadak also was. The Garden of Fadak. And this is why you find after the issue of Khilafat came up and the Khulafa came into the picture, this is why this was one of the first things they took away. Because this wasn't just some garden that you go walk in and have a good time in. This was an economic asset. See, right now, these Jewish tribes, they're promising what? They're promising the harvest of a whole year, and tribes are joining them. This is how much wealth it was. It wasn't a simple thing. Fadak was an economic asset for Ahl Bayt. And this is why, when the issue of Khilafat came up, this is one of the first things they took away. Because this was a lot of money sitting there. You could do a lot of things with Fadak. These Jewish people, they go around, they say, we'll give you the dates of a whole year of Khaybar. Well, Fadak is part of this. This is why it was so important. They start to promise tribe after tribe after tribe. Slowly, these tribes start to gather. And as these tribes start to gather, then you see it's no longer just Quraysh. There's Quraysh, and then there's Bani Sulaim, and then there are the Farazis, and then there's this tribe. 10, 15 different tribes have now come together. And they put together an army of 10,000. You're 10,000 strong now. At this point, there's no reason for you to doubt at all that you will not be able to defeat Muhammad. You feel victorious already just walking amongst this tribe. Right? You all feel victorious just walking amongst this army. News comes to the prophets. And the narration says they gave the news to the prophet, and the person rode his horse over 4 days to the prophet. This is like very quick between Mecca and Medina. Otherwise, on foot, it would take you 10, 15, 20 days. It would take you a long time. 4 days, he gets over there. They give the news to the prophet. And the prophet initially did exactly what he did in Uhud. When they brought him the letter, he said, don't read the letter out loud. My companions, they will panic. Secretly, they gave him the news that this time Ahzab is coming, and it's not just Quraysh, it's all of these people together. And you can imagine the sense that's now building in Medina. Why? Because Medina, not only was it by itself now, Medina was also going through a drought as well. And Medina was that place where most of its wealth came through the crops that you would plant and so on and so forth. It wasn't like Mecca where you had animals, and it was what? Farms. This was Medina. Palm trees. This is what they used to use. And now there's a drought, and now you have to deal with Ahzab. They're coming as well. This made things very, very difficult. Recite a salawat, please. He gathered his companions. He said, we have to consult. This was the Prophet again consulting. And everyone gave their own opinion. And there's dispute here. Did the Prophet come up with this suggestion? Or was it Salman who came up with this suggestion? Or did the Prophet come up with it and then Salman was the one who pushed it in this gathering and people agreed to it? There's dispute about this. Nonetheless, they had dispute about, should we leave Medina? Should we stay in Medina? This was always the question, yes? But now this time, they said, you know what? We cannot leave Medina. The numbers are too high. You go out there, you'll be swallowed. They said, we will stay in Medina, but the only thing that we can do is to dig a ditch or a trench around Medina. It's the only thing that we can do. And Salman then, he pushed this idea of the Prophet in the gathering. He said, Ya Rasulullah, when I was in Persia, this is what we used to do. The Arab, they were not familiar with this tactic. They used to do this. Salman said, no, I think that this is something we should do, because when we were over there, This is what we used to do. Now you have to remember, Salman has been away from the Prophet for 13 years of his prophethood. He's only joined him where? He's only joined him now in Medina. If you remember the story of Salman, he wasn't there with the Prophet in Mecca. He came when he was in Medina. He was still a slave at that point, yes? The Prophet helped him be freed, and then he joined the Prophet. He said, this is what we need to do. The Muslims agreed to this. And they started to dig this trench around Medina. Now, you have to understand, Medina, it's a city. When you have a city, building this trench around the whole thing, it's not possible. Especially because you don't have time. The army's already on its way. The time between this army has left Mecca to get to Medina, 12 days, 13 days, something like that. You don't have 10 months. You don't have a year. In 10 days, 12 days, you got to figure out what you're going to do, because there's 10,000 people who are going to come. They're all thirsty for your blood. This is the position that the Muslims were in. Extremely scary. So they started to dig this trench. And the narration says that they dug the trench in the north of Medina, because thankfully Medina was in a position where there were some mountains and some natural obstacles around it on the other sides. And this is the only reason why they were able to, dig this trench. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the time to build a trench around the whole city. So the Prophet started to dig this trench around the north of Medina, where the mountain of Uhud is. If you look at the map of Medina, you'll see the mountain of Uhud is northeast of where Medina is. On that side, he started to dig this trench. And historians have mentioned the depth of this trench and how long it was and so on and so forth. And it was a sizable trench. It's something maybe 7, 8, 10 feet in depth. It's not a small thing. And the idea here was that either you wouldn't be able to get your horse over it, or you wouldn't be able to get over it yourself. Or even if you were able to get over it, there would be archers on the other side that would take care of you, because you would be at a disadvantage, you would be at a lower position. By the time you got out of the trench, it would be trouble for you. And it's not like 10 or 15 people are coming from the other side. 10,000 people are coming from the other side. You need a clear passage to go through. This was the idea behind the trench. They started to dig this trench, and then the narration says so beautifully that as these Muslims were digging this trench, they were hungry because there was this drought. And at the same time was running out for them too. So as they were digging this trench, the narration says the Prophet used to come and he used to dig the trench with them. And the same way the Prophet used to work with the Muslims when he was building Masjid al-Quba and Masjid al-Nabi, now he was with the Muslims, he was building and digging this trench himself. And the narration says the Prophet was so hungry, and the Muslims were so hungry in these moments, that they used to take rocks and stones and tie it to their stomachs. This is something they used to do so that you would feel like your stomach is full. It's not, but you would feel like your stomach is full. And narration after narration says we saw the Prophet, we saw everyone had one stone stuck to his stomach. We saw the Prophet had 2 stones, because he was even hungrier than the others. And he started to dig this trench, and the narration says he used to work in motion with the rest of the Ansar and Muhajirin. And he had divided up in a way where one side was Muhajir, one side was Ansar. And this was a beautiful tactic from the Prophet, because the Prophet, though he believed in everyone being united, he also acknowledged their differences. He never said, we're all the same, we all have the same background, we all come from the same tribe. No. Different tribes, actually. Different backgrounds, actually. Yes, you all can unite when your purpose is the same, but at the same time, you have differences. You have groups amongst yourselves, you have tribes amongst yourselves, and hence, he grouped up the people of one tribe to work on one part of the trench, and another group from another tribe to build on another part of the trench. And the narration says that while they were building this trench, because naturally you can't close off yourself fully from the outside world. You have to come and go and so on and so forth. There were passages that they did not dig as part of this trench. But those areas that they had not dug up was so small, it was easier to cover it, or it was easier to guard it. You can guard it. You have enough numbers for that. The rest of the area you have to dig. So the narration says the Prophet used to put from one tribe, a group of them, you are in charge of this passageway. You are to guard this passageway, and the next one, and the rest that they had dug up. And there are so many narrations that speak to us of the miracles that took place during this time while the Prophet was digging up this trench and these Muslimin were hungry. They didn't even have food to eat. The narration says the Prophet used to work hard, then he used to go sit in the corner and he used to automatically fall asleep out of fatigue. He would wake up, said, why didn't you wake me up? He'd go back to work again. And if you didn't know, you would think that he's just one person amongst the thousands of people that were there. The narration says Muhajirin and Ansar were working. Then Salman came. And Salman, of course, he's been through this before. He knows how to dig trenches. He's worked like this before. He's seen this before. So each of them, they said, you know what? Salman's with us. And the Ansar said, no, Salman is with us. The news got to the Prophet that these guys are having an argument. It's like, who's Salman? Salman is part of whose group? And the Prophet told them a line that people maybe at that time thought it was just a simple line and the Prophet was just trying to solve this argument. He said, no, Salmanu minna ahl al-bayt. He said, Salman is one of us. But in reality, this line had far more reaching theological implications. Because then later on, they say, the Prophet mentioned this a number of times. It wasn't just this one time. And other times when Salman used to come into the gathering and the Arab of the time, they didn't like him. They said, who is this guy? He keeps coming and going. The Prophet used to tell them, he said, Salman is an ocean that will never go dry. And he is a treasure that will never end. Salman is one of us Ahlul Bayt. The meaning that this line had was far deeper than what the average Muslim was just understanding. And Imam As-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Imam As-Sadiq narrates, his companion asked him, he said, why do you speak about Salman al-Farisi so much? Why do you talk about Salman the Persian so much? And Imam As-Sadiq corrected him quickly. He said, no, you shouldn't be calling him Salman al-Farisi. He is Salman al-Muhammadi. He is Salman, the one who belongs to us. And then he started to speak of the high status of Salman. This is a person, nobody even knows him. Nobody cared about Salman. He didn't have a family. He didn't have a tribe. No one cared about him. But he was famous in the skies. He was well known in the skies. As they are digging this trench, the narration says they came across a big rock, a big stone that they couldn't get through. And the Muslimin, they tried, and some of these tools that they were using started to break. This was such a big stone and rock. Word got to the Prophet. They said, Ya Rasulullah, we don't know what to do here. What should we do? The Prophet came. He took the shovel or the tool himself. He struck the stone, and there was a light that came out of it. And he said takbir, and all the Muslims, just as following him, they said takbir as well. This is the first one. He struck it again the second time. The light came out. He said takbir. All the Muslims said takbir with him. The third time, the same thing happened. Takbir. Everyone said takbir with him. And finally, the stone came apart. And then they asked, they said, Ya Rasulullah, what is this takbir you keep saying? He said, the first time I struck this stone, I saw a light that showed me the palaces of Persia. And that you all will conquer that area one day. And the second time I struck it, I saw the palaces of Rome, and that you all would conquer it one day. And the third time I struck it, I saw the palaces of Yemen, and that you all would conquer it one day. And these Muslims, they were astonished. But you have to understand, in what context is the Prophet saying this? There's 10,000 people coming to kill him right now. This is not a normal, it's not like everything is looking good and you say, yeah, inshallah we'll be fine. It's easy to predict that when everything is looking good, right? When the stock market is going up, it's easy to say, yeah, inshallah the economy is going to be good. That's easy. This is when everything is going down. 10,000 people are coming to kill you. You have maybe 1,000 or 2,000. And the Prophet said, listen, I see you all conquering all of these areas. And of course, amongst the Muslims, there were those who did not believe him. They were like, this is impossible. How is that possible? They're like, this is astonishing. It doesn't make any sense. And that same moment of surprise that the Muslims had, that they were like, this is not even possible. What are you talking about? This is exactly the type of surprise you and I have when we hear the return of the 12th Imam. You and I are just as surprised, huh? You and I say, it's impossible. One government, the whole thing. No, that's not possible. Things don't look good right now. Muslims being killed every day. They're being massacred every day. And the same Prophet gave you and I that promise too. That there will come a time where all of this will be under the authority of my grandson, the Mahdi will come. And he will bring justice and peace to it. And you and I, we can't believe this. When it comes to the Muslims at that time, we look back at them in hindsight and we say, how could you not believe the promise of the Prophet? Didn't he promise you? Didn't he tell you? And the Prophet has told us just as clearly. This is one of the musallamat of Islam, no matter which school of thought you belong to. You know, if you go to the harshest fraction of the Sunni school, the most conservative, the belief in the Mahdi is there. Belief in the Mahdi is there. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Prophet gave us that same promise. Of course you and I sit there and say, how is this even possible? And this is what the promise the Prophet is giving them. And by the time of the Khulafa, they were ruling all these areas. By the time of the Khulafa, the Muslims had taken over Yemen and Persia and Rome. It's not even 100 years later, less than 100 years later. This hunger in the city of Medina is becoming more and more severe. The narration says one day, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, he thought, let me go home and ask my wife, what do we have? Let's just invite the Prophet at least. Have the Prophet, have him come, eat something. The narration says Jabir came home to his wife. Asked her, said, what do we have? She said, listen, we have maybe enough that we can make a loaf or two out of it. And that's it. He said, fine, that's enough. That's whatever we have. We'll go, I'm going to go invite the Prophet. He went to the Prophet. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I want you to come to my house. The Prophet said, sure, do you guys have anything to eat? He said, yes, we have something we will share with each other. And the Prophet said, tayyibun, this is pure food. I will come. Except the Prophet did something that Jabir was not expecting, and the wife of Jabir was also not expecting. The Prophet turned to all of these Muslims who were working on the trench. He said, you guys come with me. And in true couples fashion, Jabir went home and they had an argument at home. He came home and the wife said, wait a second, you invited all these guys? It's like, how am I supposed to prepare now? God forbid if the husband is one of those people, just invites people, It's like recipe for disaster. He came home, the wife said, you invited all these people, they're coming to our house? Or the Prophet invited them? He said, no, I swear it was the Prophet invited them, it wasn't me. And this wife, the faith that she had, she said, if the Prophet invited them, then he knows what he's doing. And the narration says they came to the house of Jabir, and the Prophet ate from the bread, and then he gave from the bread to all of these people from the trench, and the bread wouldn't finish. And they all walked away satiated that day. And there are multiple narrations about this issue of hunger and the miracles of the Prophet. But I tell you something else that's not so much of a supernatural miracle, but it's a miracle in spirituality. And that is that one of these days, they say the Prophet was working very hard. The stones tied to the stomach, the hunger is bothering everyone. Then they say all of a sudden Fatima came. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Prophet comes, and with him, Fatima approached him. And she had in her hand a little loaf of bread. And the Prophet turned to her and said, Fatima, why have you come? She said, I've brought some food for you. And the Prophet said, this is your food. This is Ali's food. Whose food is this? And Fatima said, this is the food I had prepared for my own children. This is the food of Hassan and Hussein I have brought for you. I was going to give to them, but I know you're working. You don't have anything to eat. This is not a supernatural miracle, but this is a miracle in sacrifice. This is a miracle in spirituality. And the Prophet took it and he praised Fatima and he said, this is the first thing your father is eating after 3 days. This is how these Muslims had started to dig up this trench until the point came where now the Ahzab were coming. And Ali ibn Abi Talib is watching all of this, and he's learning from the sacrifice and the compromise of the Prophet and how he puts himself through hunger for the sake of others. And this is why years later, Prophet is not around anymore. 24 years later, Ali becomes Khalifa. His governor in Basra, they invite him to a lavish gathering. And Ali ibn Abi Talib finds out about this. And then he writes a letter to his governor, Uthman ibn Hunayf. And this letter is so powerful, it's in Nahj al-Balagha. He said, Uthman, how could you go and sit in this lavish gathering? Because he was a representative of Ali. If you're just on your own, that's one thing. You're representing my government, yes? He said, Ibn Hunayf, how could you go and sit in this lavish gathering when your imam, the only thing he eats is 1 or 2 dates and a couple loaves of bread? And you went and sat in this lavish gathering? And then he continued and he said, Wallah, I swear by Allah, if I wanted to, لَهْتَدَيْتُ إِلَى مُصَفَّ الْعَسَلِ, I could have had the sweetest of honeys delivered to me. And I could have had the core of wheat delivered to me. You know, that fine flour, the best of foods. And I could have been the one choosing between the types of foods that are brought to me. But I would never do this because my ego and my nafs would get the best of me. And then he said, why should my stomach be full? This is Ali that we will never understand. We will never understand this man. This is Ali, he said, why should my stomach be full? When maybe all the way in Hijaz, he's in Iraq now, maybe all the way in Hijaz, there is someone who's hungry at night. And why should I drink from the best of drinks when there is maybe someone who is thirsty right now? This is a level you and I will never understand. But this Ali is learning this from who? He's learning it from his master, the prophets. He's seeing this role model in front of him. If we can please recite a salawat on both sides and move forward. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. One more salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The Ahzab now come, and they gather in the north of Medina. And the Quran says the moment these 10,000 strong came to the north of Medina, you can imagine how the hearts are beating. Because you see this army is in front of you now. It's no longer rumors. They're there. They're looking you in the eye. And the Quran says the munafiqeen and those whose faith was weak, they looked at it and they said, you know what? This prophet tricked his people. Because when the army was coming, the prophet gave his people the news that they would be victorious. He already told them, you're going to take over Rome and Persia, everything. Forget about this. He already told them. And the munafiqeen said, this prophet, he is tricking his companions. There's no way you're getting out of this. And the Quran says, when the believers saw this Ahzab in front of them, they said, this is exactly what Allah and His Prophet had promised to us. This is exactly what they told us is going to happen. The reaction was completely different for the two groups. The Ahzab come, and they now are going to lay siege to Medina. This Medina that's already under drought, now you really can't go out and in. Now you can't get any food from outside because the siege is going to be set. And this siege is going to be set to the city of Medina for over a month. It's going to pressure these Muslims every single day. And you would think that things cannot get any worse than they already have. Like God cannot push these Muslims more than He possibly can. Except He would. And except He can. Because then it says that one of the 3 tribes who was still in Medina, those 3 Jewish tribes that we had, 2 of them were already expelled. There was 1 left in Medina. This tribe was called Bani Qurayza. This one tribe who was left in Medina, Abu Sufyan sent word to them that we need you to break your peace treaty and betray Muhammad from within Medina. They are not outside of Medina now. They are in Medina. The narration says the Prophet dug the trench in the north. He sent all the women and the children to the south because that would be the area where they would be the furthest from the battlefield. And guess who's in the south? The Jewish tribe of Bani Qurayza is in the south. Now imagine you have 10,000 on the other side, but within your own ranks and your own city, you have a tribe that is extremely strong, because all of these Jewish tribes, they would not fight too much. You know what they had? They had castles. This was their way of doing things. You had a problem with them, they would go in their castle. That's it. You can't do anything. This castle is so strong that you can't do anything. That's what happened in Constantinople. Why did it take so long to take over? Because they had the castles that you could never, ever infiltrate. And Bani Qurayza are in their castle. Abu Sufyan sends word to them, and Huyay ibn Akhtab, the head of Bani Nadir, the other Jewish tribe, starts to come into Medina. And of course, you can't come in with an army. 1 or 2 people, they can make their way into Medina. They made their way into Medina. And he came to the head of Bani Qurayza, this Jewish tribe that is in Medina. His name was Ka'b. The moment he came in, he said, Ka'b, I've come to speak to you about Muhammad. Now take a look at how things are going to change in these moments. He came to him, he said, I have come to speak to you about Muhammad and breaking your peace treaty with Muhammad. And Ka'b, the head of Banu Qurayza, said, no, I can't even talk to you, because Muhammad has done nothing but good to us. We had a peace treaty with him. He's not hurt any one of us. He has supported us. He has protected us. I don't even want to talk to you. This is initially how Ka'b responded. And then Huyay came back to him. He said, just open the door. Let me just talk to you. Just sit down. Because he had closed the door to the castle. He wouldn't allow him in. He kept going back and forth until finally Ka'b gave in. He said, okay, fine, come in. He came in. Huyay walked in, and then he guilt-tripped him into joining him. He said, Ka'b, aren't you embarrassed? I've gathered all the tribes in Arabia. They're all waiting for you. All gathered, all of these people. I've gone to Quraysh. All of their greats have agreed they have come. The other Jewish tribes, they have agreed to their come. Qatfan has agreed to come. Everyone has come. And now you're telling me you're not going to join us? You're telling me you're not going to break your peace treaty with Muhammad? And as much as Ka'b said no, Huyay kept insisting, and because they knew each other. He kept insisting until a point came where Ka'b agreed. He said, you know what? Yes, we will do this. And Huyay gave him a promise that, listen, we will support you. You guys go from inside. We are already outside. This is the end of everything. When the news of this got to the Prophet, this really made the Prophet concerned. It made him sad. Not because he feels like he's going to lose this battle. He already knows. But about the treachery, the treason. We had a peace treaty with each other. And in Islam takes that very seriously. You give your word. You give your word to the worst person on earth, you have to hold your word. You have to keep your promise. The Prophet heard about this. And then the Muslims started to hear about this as well. And this is where in their minds all chaos broke loose. And the Quran says, in those moments, you felt like you were being attacked from the top and the bottom. And in reality, they were being attacked from the bottom and the top. Why? Because in the north, Ahzab had come. In the south of Medina, Banu Qurayza has now broken their peace treaty. And the Prophet sent word and he said, go and verify. He sent companions of his to verify because he didn't want this to just be a rumor. This is a big deal. He sent companions of his to go and verify. They went and spoke with Ka'b. And Ka'b said, listen, I'm going to tear up the peace treaty in front of you. This is over. And the Quran says, in those moments, the Muslims were under so much pressure. وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارِ It's almost as if their eyes started to see blurry. You know when you're in shock so much, you don't even see the thing that's in front of you. This is what the Quran is describing. It's like these guys were in shock so much. They didn't know what to do in these moments. وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرِ It's like their heart was in their throat. You know when you can feel your heartbeat so much? Feel like your heart is just jumping out. This is what the Quran says. This is not hadith or narration or we don't know, is it? No, this is word by word from Quran, yes? وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرِ وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ And in those moments, you started to doubt the promise of God. And you said, this God of ours, I know He promised us and everything, but look at what's happening. This is not what we wanted. And this is about to look like the biggest defeat that the Muslims will ever take on. And it's about to look like the greatest casualties that they will ever give. But how will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take this moment and change it? And who will play a big role in all of this? And how will this battle turn into that one battle of the Prophet, that though the people taking part in it are the greatest ever, the Muslims will give the least casualties in any of the battles. The least casualties, less than Badr. 10,000 on the other side. But this was the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only will they become victorious, they will give less casualties than they gave in Badr as well. How did the Prophet do this? And whose help did he have to rely on? That inshallah we will leave for tomorrow night, and we'll continue with the battle of Ahzab tomorrow night. Let us take a moment to dim the lights inshallah and take our hearts to the city of Kufa, where our beloved Imam, our beloved first Imam, is going through difficult times and difficult moments. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayka ya Ali ibn Abi Talib. The narration says this final day, this final night, Ali ibn Abi Talib's body had become extremely weak. And he started to make his final wasiyah and his final will to his sons and to his children. And imagine Zainab and Kulthum and Hassan and Hussein have gathered. Everyone has gathered around the area of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he started to speak to Hassan and Hussein. And he said, tonight you will do the ghusl and kafan of me. And when you put me and you want to pick my body up and move me towards the graveyard, you will see that you will only pick up one side. Because the other side, the malaika will come and they will pick it up. And when you put my body on the camel and the camel is carrying this body, you will find that the camel will move and stop by its own, because this camel knows where to stop. And then Ali said this one line that brings pain to our hearts. It shows the loneliness of Ali, because then Ali said, "O Hassan, O Hussein, when I die on a night like this, do not leave my body until the next day. You are to bury my body during nighttime." Why, Ya Ali? Why? Why not wait for the Muslims to come? Why not wait for your followers to come to pray on your body, so on and so forth? Because he said, I have enemies. They will not even leave my body alone. He said, you bury my body during nighttime, and when you bury my body, you are to hide my grave. You are not to leave anything behind that shows that this is the grave of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So many people have so many grudges from Ali. So many people have so much hatred for Ali, because Ali was the one who, whenever the Prophet wanted to get anything done, it would be done by the hands of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Now this grudge, this hatred is so much, he knows even his body will not be left alone. And then the narration says that Ali continued to make his final wasiyas. He made some wasiyas as it relates to Ibn Muljam. And then he continued, and the narration says he was fainting and he was coming back. And he was fainting and he was coming back. And he was saying some things very quietly. And the narration says at one point he said, "Marhaban, marhaban, welcome, welcome." And when he came back, they asked him, they said, "Ya Ali, who are you speaking to?" "Ya Ali, there's no one else around us here." And Ali said, you know, in these moments that I fainted, I saw people on the other side. And I saw the Prophet, he is waiting for me. And I saw my uncle Hamza, he is waiting for me. And I saw Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, my brother, and he is waiting for me. And then maybe he paused for a moment, and then he said, there's one more person I also saw waiting for me. And this is no one but Fatima. I also saw Fatima waiting for me. And the narration says he took his final breaths and then he closed his eyes. And now the house of Ali turns into a household of orphans. And the narrations say they took this body and they did the ghusl and kafan in the middle of the night. How lonely is Ali? They took his body in the middle of the night, they buried it. And imagine what happens to this house when they come back after they've buried their own father. Imagine what Hassan and Hussein and Kulthum and Zainab are going through when they come back to this house and they see the place of Ali is now empty. There is no more welcoming father. There is no more compassionate father. Imagine how quiet and how sad this house becomes on a night like this. And the narration says years later, the companion of the sixth Imam, he says, I was with the sixth Imam, I was on a trip. And we were going from Medina and we were passing by the city of Kufa. And he says, all of a sudden, I saw Imam al-Sadiq. He distanced himself from this caravan. This caravan moved forward. Then I saw Imam al-Sadiq got off of his camel. He came and he walked away from the caravan. He took a couple steps forward. Then he fell on the ground. He took from the dirt of that ground and he started to smell it. And I turned to Imam al-Sadiq and I said, Ya Abu Abdullah, what is this? Ya Ibn Rasulullah, O son of the Prophet, what is it that you're finding here in the middle of nowhere? And the narration says he cried and cried until he fainted. And when he came back, he said, this is the grave of my grandfather, Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the grave that has been hidden for so many years. And I asked him, I said, why would this grave be hidden for so many years? And he said, because my grandfather had so many enemies. They knew they wouldn't even leave his body alone after his death. This is the pain that Imam al-Sadiq is going through, just seeing the grave of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But we say to Hassan and Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum on a day like this, on a night like this, Ya Hussein, Ya Hassan, Ya Zainab, Ya Kulthum, at least your father, there was someone to bury him. At least your father, there was someone to gather around him, to give him a funeral. At least he is placed in the ground with respect. At least his body isn't lying around in the plains of Karbala. On the 10th of Muharram, there will come a time where Zainab will not even have the opportunity to bury the body of Hussein. And the narration says after the battlefield came to an end on the 10th of Muharram, then the narrator on the side of Yazid says, I looked upon these tents and I saw this lady running out of the tent and she was hitting herself and she ran into the battlefield and she was calling out, Wa Muhammadah, Wa Aliyah. And I looked closer and I asked, who is this woman? They said, this is Zainab, the daughter of Ali. This is Zainab who's come out. And the narration says that Zainab came out and she was calling out to the Prophet. She said, Wa Muhammadah, Hada Husaynun bil Ara. This is that grandchild of yours. This is that child of yours that used to come on your shoulders. This is that child of yours that you used to kiss with your own lips. This is that child of yours. His body is torn into pieces. Muqatta'ul a'dha. Murammalun bid-dima. His body is covered with blood in the plains of Karbala. And the narration says Zainab wasn't alone. There was someone else who also came and threw herself on the body of her father. And this was none but Sukayna. Sukayna came into the battlefield. She saw the body of Hussein. She threw herself on the body of Hussein. And the narration says she fainted out of the pain that she had gone through and out of the agony that Sukayna had in her heart. And she says, while I had fainted, I saw a dream in which my father recited these lines to me. He said, Shi'ati ma in sharibtum ma a'adhbin fadhkuruni. From now on, whenever you drink a little bit of cool water, remember me. أو سمعتم بشهيد أو غريب فاندبوني. Whenever you hear about someone who is lonely, whenever you hear about someone who everyone left alone, whenever you hear about the one who's left thirsty in the plains of Karbala, you are to remember me, فَذْكُرُونِي. Imagine the pain that Sukayna went through. And the narration says that as much as Sukayna and Zainab wanted to stay with the bodies of the shuhada, they were forcefully taken away. And they were forced away from the body of Hussein. Allah la'natullah ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Let us take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat, especially the marhumin and marhumat of the sponsors of tonight's program, with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Brother Salman, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, حسین یا حسین یا
علی مولا علی یا علی مولا علی یا علی مولا علی یا علی مولا علی یا علی مولا علی یا علی مولا علی یا علی مولا علی
یا علی مولا علی
وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر
وارث قرآن
ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن روتی ہے عزا مسجد کوفہ بھی ہے گریا ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر وہ آج سے آغاز ہوا کرے وہ بلا کا مقدومہ کونین کا جاری ہوا گریا مرقد میں محمد بھی نظر آئے پریشان ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن کیا زہر میں ڈوبی ہوئی شمشیر چلی ہے لو زخمی ہوا سجدے میں داماد نبی ہے دنیا سے چلا دیکھیے کعبے کا نگہباں ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر وارث قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر وارث قرآن جبریل امی خاک اڑاتے ہوئے آئے آدم بھی یہی نوحہ سناتے ہوئے آئے کس کو دم مشکل میں پکارے گا مسلمان ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن تو نے بن ملجم یہ ستم کیسا ہے ڈھایا سجدے میں نمازی کا لہو کیوں ہے بہایا عباس کو بچپن میں کیا چاک گریباں ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر وارث قرآن ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر وارث قرآن حسنین کے سر پر ہے یتیمی کا اندھیرا رخصت ہوا سورج کی نگاہوں سے سویرا زمزم میں تلا تم ہے تو کوثر میں ہے طوفان ہے وقت سحر خون میں تر بارش قرآن
وارث قرآن یا حسین یا حسین بھائی محمد وآل محمد صلوات
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا نجد الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن عليا حجة الله اللهم صل على محمد حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق وليك الفرج الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد
It's fine.
اللهم
It went under my clothing.
محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد لا إله إلا الله لا إله
إلا الله لا إله إلا الله تزيها نظرا سلام عليكم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور، وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه عليه، وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان، وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرها من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار فيما تمن علي، وأدخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. صلى الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله.
لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. تسبيحا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم أدخل على أهل القبور السرور. اللهم أغن كل فقير. اللهم أشبع كل جائع. اللهم اكس كل عريان. اللهم اغذ دين كل مدين. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب. اللهم رد كل غريب. اللهم فك كل أسير. اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اشف كل مريض. اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك. اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك. اللهم اقض عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد.
Inshallah, ziyarat will be after the dua, after iftar, inshallah. Just a quick announcement. Inshallah, the to-go boxes have been placed outside where the cafe is, where the chai stand is. For the mu'mineen who wish to leave, the to-go boxes are outside. Also, there are kids' meals today, inshallah. Please stay seated on the dastarkhan, and the volunteers will be distributing them along with the niyaz for the adults as well. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Inshallah, we have a announcement from our representative here, Sister Malahat from Huaz Hussain. I would like you all to request you all to please pay attention for 5 minutes. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat. Allahumma salli.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for giving me your time while you're opening your fast. Just wanted to make a quick announcement. So, mashallah, the central team shares numbers with us for how many people have signed up in each city, in each state, and we're kind of lagging behind. So I promised them 200 new signups. Now, this register interest form is not just for donors. So if you are too old or too young, it's okay. Or if you have a medical condition and you cannot donate, this is not for donors only. This is something I wanted to clarify since there's so many mashallah over here. It is just if you have an interest in this campaign, if you can maybe volunteer down the road, if you can spread the word amongst your neighbors, colleagues, co-workers, students, whoever. So if you would please do me a favor tonight's the night, inshallah, in the memory or in honor of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, if you would sign up, there are QR forms put everywhere. If you would register, scan it with your phone, just asks for your name and your email and phone number and you're done. And we truly, truly appreciate it, inshallah. May Allah give you guys lots of blessings. Thank you. Salawat.
Muhammad wa
Excuse me, everyone. We're going to start Dua Munajat Imam Ali in the next couple minutes, so please help us with the cleanup and settle down, please. Thank you.
Inshallah, we're going to begin with the recitation of Munajat of Imam Ali. Inshallah, as we settle down, let's recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala. One more salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك الأمان يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. وأسألك الأمان يوم يعض الظالم على يديه يقول يا ليتني اتخذت مع الرسول سبيلا. وأسألك الأمان يوم يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواصي والأقدام. وأسألك الأمان يوم لا يجزي والد عن ولده ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله حق. وأسألك الأمان يوم لا ينفع الظالمين معذرتهم ولهم اللعنة ولهم سوء الدار. وأسألك الأمان يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله. وأسألك الأمان يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغنيه. وأسألك الأمان يوم يود المجرم لو يفتدي من عذاب يومئذ ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه ومن في الأرض جميعا ثم ينجي. كلا إنها لظى نزاعة للشوى. Everyone. مولاي يا مولاي أنت المولى وأنا العبد وهل يرحم العبد إلا المولى. مولاي يا مولاي أنت المالك وأنا المملوك وهل يرحم المملوك إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت العزيز وأنا الذليل وهل يرحم الذليل إلا العزيز. مولاي يا مولاي أنت الخالق وأنا المخلوق وهل يرحم المخلوق إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت العظيم وأنا الحقير وهل يرحم الحقير إلا العظيم مولاي يا مولاي أنت القوي وأنا الضعيف وهل يرحم الضعيف إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغني وأنا الفقير وهل يرحمه الفقير إلا الغني مولاي يا مولاي أنت المعطي وأنا السائل وهل يرحم السائل إلا المعطي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الحي وأنا الميت وهل يرحم الميت إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت الباقي وأنا الفاني وهل يرحم الفاني إلا الباقي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الدائم وأنا الزائل وهل يرحمه الزائل إلا الدائم مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرازق وأنا المرزوق وهل يرحم المرزوق إلا الرازق مولاي يا مولاي أنت الجواد وأنا البخيل وهل يرحم البخيل إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت المعافي وأنا المبتلى وهل يرحم المبتلى إلا المعافي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الكبير وأنا الصغير وهل يرحمه الصغير إلا الكبير مولاي يا مولاي أنت الهادي وأنا الضال وهل يرحم الضال إلا الهادي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرحمن وأنا المرحوم وهل يرحم المرحوم إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت السلطان وأنا الممتحن وهل يرحم الممتحن إلا السلطان مولاي يا مولاي أنت الدليل وأنا المتحير وهل يرحم المتحير إلا الدليل مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغفور وأنا المذنب وهل يرحمه المذنب إلا مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغالب وأنا المغلوب وهل يرحمه المغلوب إلا الغالب مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرب وأنا المربوب وهل يرحم المربوب إلا الرب مولاي يا مولاي أنت المتكبر وأنا الخاشع وهل يرحم الخاشع إلا المتكبر مولاي يا مولاي ارحمني برحمتك وارض عني بجودك وكرمك وفضلك يا ذا الجود والإحسان والطول والامتنان برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.